Good evening, class. Is it audible? Yes. Yes. Okay. Welcome to this program. Right now, before I start this session, I would want to have few clarifications. Right. Then once I have those clarifications, then we would enter into the session. And today's session is supposed to be an introductory session. So, how will your 2.5 hours going to span today is that first 30 minutes I would give you what is the brief aspect about this program in toto. Then once I discuss about what is the brief aspect about this program, then in the next 2 hours, we would start with your first session of polity, right? I think hope you have got the syllabus and you have got the schedule, right? If you have not got, I think you would get those schedule paper after your class, right? Now, before I start, how many of you have given attempt already? Right, good. Okay. I just want to listen from you people for a while that what do you expect? What do you want? Because it is democracy, right? We would see whether it is a substantive democracy or procedural today. But tell me, what do you want? What are you actually expecting? What do you think prelims is actually? Right? Everybody says, sir, it is a devil. First thing. Chodo. Uske alawa. Apart from that, what are your concerns? Sir, this is my concern. I have been failing like this. Lack of revision. We do not know what to do. I just want to listen. చెప్పండమ్మా పర్లేదు. ఈరోజు మౌనవ్రతం ఏం లేదు కదా. So that I can get a sample size, right? If you don't want to say, then I already will have my own sample size. Then I think I would consider that. Now, generally, most of you will say that, sir, recollection is a problem. One. Second, confusion. Third, most of you will feel this out of syllabus, right? Every question you say, sir, out of syllabus. Gaya bahar, right? That's what you find. Now, one simple solution for this is revision. Okay. One major component of these next 40 sessions, which is roughly 100 hours, are going to be focusing on revision, one dimension. And how are we going to revise? Now, there is something called as exam specific content, right? I think you keep hearing my videos and I think we have taken a particular session on that. One very, very important aspect of this particular 100 hours is going to be that we are going to focus only on exam specific content. First thing, do not expect whole of your general studies to be revised just like your foundation course. No, I'm not going to do that. First thing. The second thing that you need to remember with respect to this particular session, we are going to revise through making something called as short notes. That is snippet form, right? You would have heard about the snippet form. We are going to make these short notes as a process and we are going to revise through that. And short notes doesn't mean that you keep on writing what is there in the book only. No. Short notes fundamentally means that what is supposed to be remembered when I see a question on particular topic. That's all. I don't need to recollect anything else apart from those 5-6 points which are being told. How to prepare that? Whenever it is to be prepared, I would dictate. Right? Whenever it is to be prepared, I would dictate. First aspect. The second dimension that we would focus upon is the memory techniques, right? Especially under pressure, what happens is our recollection ability will fall. And when our recollection ability will fall, what we do? We give up. So in that context, we would devise how to remember certain things. How to remember certain things, right? Now, for suppose if suddenly they ask you, arrange the following order of formation of states. If I ask you, what about 1960? What about 1963? What about 67, 71, 72, 75, 82, 87? These are the years of different states that have been formed. Suddenly, if I ask you what happened, under that pressure, you are unable to recollect. So, what we would focus upon is we would definitely focus upon various aspects of memory techniques, right, which have been working and which I personally use them, right? Now, the business of this next 100 hours is completely from the side of the management and from the side of the individual who's taking this course is only one thing, is to capacity build, right? Is to capacity build. And so that what happens is you get closer to the cutoff. Whatever we had discussed in the orientation, our magic figure is going to be 100 plus. We don't want 120, 130, 150, 160, 199, not needed. 100 plus. Our magic figure, because that is sufficient for you to clear this stage of examination. First component. The second component of this particular course is going to be knowledge plus, and that is knowledge plus technique. Now, what are we doing is in the initial aspect, we would build the knowledge. That is, for suppose if you see a schedule, we would build the knowledge of polity, we would build the knowledge of geography, we would build the knowledge of environment. Then what we do is we try to extrapolate this knowledge and we'll try to learn these techniques through PYQs. Because what happens is, if it so happens that there is so much of gap that is given between your knowledge and application, you forget the knowledge. So what we are going to do is we are going to reinforce the knowledge through technique with the application of PYQs. Because what is going to happen is PYQs are going to be a good testimonial for you to practice anything that you have learned. And in this technique, you would have keep hearing about something called as elimination. This is one common technique that you keep hearing, and people keep buzzing around saying, sir, elimination, elimination, elimination. Finally, they will get eliminated. That's a different aspect. Right. Now you have to see that how organically are we going to incorporate these elimination techniques, first aspect. Because what happens is one fine morning, I don't get up and recollect these elimination techniques. Sir told extreme statement, sir told broader statement, what should we do? No. We are going to go for organic imbibing of these elimination techniques first. The second thing is, what we are going to see is, we are going to learn the technique of handling a vacuum in the exam. Because what happens is, there are some bunch of questions which are generally given in the examination where you do not know anything. For example, in 2022, there was one question on Gucci mushroom. They didn't say Gucci mushroom, they said Gucci. Now, should you think that it is mushroom or it is some handbag or something, whatever, whichever brand you want to see? Now, here what you need to understand is that creates a vacuum. And when that creates a vacuum, we will look at some particular techniques. Especially, you would see that UPSC plays with options. We would fundamentally learn the different arrangements of options which are generally used by UPSC as a pattern to solve such questions. Do not worry, right? We would infuse them. And the third thing that you would learn as part of techniques, apart from elimination, apart from handling this or option pattern that we generally come across, is how do we handle something which is unknown, right? How do we handle which is something unknown? Now, one thing is that we would learn the art of searching clue for this particular question in the question itself, right? We'll learn the art of searching clue for this particular question within a question. And it is very, very definite that UPSC gives you a clue in the question. We don't observe. That's a different point. And every year, that is a pattern which is followed by UPSC at any cost. We would have to search. For example, in 2021, there was one question which talked about R2. There was one question which talked about R2 process. It is one of the processes which have been imbibed by UNEP. And this is an unknown question. Nobody goes to UNEP website and sits and read about it. No, definitely not. Now here, in the options, there were two statements which were having R in them. Right? Now this is Jugaad. This is what is handling which is unknown and searching for the clue. Because at the end of the day, if I leave such questions and come out, what is going to happen is I am not going to reach that magic figure of 100 plus. Now, there were two probabilities, there were two statements with R in it. Right, sir? How can you say? We have to use it. There's no other, right? And for learning those only, I think everybody has assembled here. That is very, very definite. Because knowledge wala component, you would know, you would read, but we are going to refine that aspect as well. Right? Now here, R2. That means if I commonsensically think it is going to be something like this. It is fundamentally showing it is an aspect of recycling. Now, how are we arriving at it? Clue within the question. You would see that. Right? So these aspects would be with respect to your technique part of your examination. And apart from that, we would also take away one very, very important aspect of after these 100 hours of sessions is the orientation of the exam, which is very, very important. What happens is the major miss in the context of prelims examination is we do not have a right orientation. And when you do not have a right orientation, it becomes a difficult business for you to clear this examination. So once we see these 100 hours, we would orient ourselves towards the examination to a larger extent. And we will have to move towards that 100 plus, right? So these are the things that we are going to learn across these sessions. I think most of you had an apprehension stating, sir, you are saying 100 hours and you are saying you will revise whole GS. That was the major apprehension, because I think after my orientation session, a lot of people had this doubt of, sir, how can you finish 100 hours, right? GS. We will finish. We will finish for the reason that we are only going to focus upon exam specific content. And we would see that how are we going to interlink these concepts so that in a small ball, what all fibers are interlinked, we are going to look at it, right? For example, I'll tell you, I think today's session is going to be polity. We're going to deal with the basic terms of polity. And when you look at today's session, you would realize that polity is never a game of memory, it is a game of exceptions. Now, there are two ways of remembering the fundamental duties and DPSP. One way is what you do, that you take the book and whole swinging movement will go on, right? I don't know whether Lakshmikant will get up from there and run away. That's a different aspect. That is one way. Sit and but some mantras will be going on. The second aspect is smart way. I would learn what are exceptions and I would learn what are the commonalities that are existing. Simple. Because what happens is one very, very big advantage that you have in prelims examination is you don't need to recollect to a larger extent for the reason that answer is in front of your eyes. You just have to identify. And for identification, every subject has a trick like this. We don't understand. And for polity, it is driven on the subject of exceptions. For example, when you see Article 20 of fundamental rights, that Article 20 or Article 22 per se, most of you will talk about self-incrimination in the context of Article 20. But you forget to realize that there is an exception that all of the conditionalities apply only for criminal cases. And that is only tested in your examination, nothing else. Nothing else is tested. And when you look at your Article 25, you see use the practice, profess, preach, everything you study. But you need to understand that there is an exception for Article 25 in the context of public morality, in the context of public order, and in the context of health, right? And also there is one more line which says that in the context of other fundamental rights. And the linkage that you get for this particular article is what your Shabarimala case, where in other fundamental rights in the context of Article 17, in the context of Article 19, in the context of Article 21. Now, instead of remembering the verbatim, instead of remembering the everything under this earth, what we need to see is we need to focus upon what do we need for that subject. That is more important. That is very, very important for you to identify what is to be remembered for what subject. Are you understanding, right? So this is going to be your next 100 hours to a larger extent. I think the detailed schedule, I think you would get the detailed schedule. I think on which day we are going to handle what topics, right? That will be given as per the sessions. These sessions will be continuous, okay? For the reason that I don't want the ideology to be polluted from outside, okay? People were asking me, sir, why did you keep them continuous? You would have given a break, weekend breaks. No. This 40 days is all about ideological transformation, right? And ideological transformation moving towards the orientation of the examination. And I don't want to leave you free until we finish this 40 days for the reason that there is so much pollution outside already. Okay. So I don't want you to transfuse the ideologies and make it khichdi. And sir, you said that, you said this, you said that, what is happening? Right? That was the reason behind keeping this 40 days continuously. And apart from that, ensuring that levels of commitment for the reason that this stage of examination demands that commitment. And so many were asking, sir, is 4 months sufficient for us to clear prelims? We are freshers. That is one more doubt that we had. More than sufficient, right? More than sufficient, provided you study the way you're supposed to study, right? Okay. Anything you want to ask before we start the session? Any other thing that you want to ask? General things, general apprehensions, general doubts. Man kottanu. Definitely kottanu. చూడ్డానికి అలా ఉంటాను ఒప్పుకుంటాను బట్ I definitely don't, right? You can relax, lay back, and please ask what you want to ask. Huh? Anything? Any apprehensions that you have? Huh? CSAT. CSAT is not my business. My business is GS1, morning paper, right? Maybe here and there I would tell you certain aspects in the context of some aspects of tackling reading comprehension, but I would not deal with the quant part of it, definitely. Right? Any other? One thing, please remember that I don't want you to break this chain. First thing, right? General instructions that I don't want you to break this chain. If you're attending today, I want you to attend till the last day, right? Then only you will see the transformation, right? It is like a homeopathic medicine, right? First day will be sweet, second day sweet, third day even sweeter, fourth day you will get bored, right? So same old white goalie we have to take. But on 40th day, you will say, it's cured, right? It is going to be like that. It's a slow infusion that I want, right? So please maintain the discipline, and anything you want to ask, anything you don't understand, anything you want to reach out, it's all completely fine because it is all your right to ask us. It is our responsibility to answer, right? Please do not hesitate at any point of time, right? And for online, I think those who are attending the session online, we would have the doubt session towards the end of the class, right? So please reserve all your doubts and ask towards the end of the class. Those are attending online. Okay. We'll start. Now, when you look at the exam aspect of polity, especially prelims, I want you to keep writing running notes, right? I don't want you to listen to it as if you're listening to a burra katha or something, right? Running notes, and wherever it is required, I would dictate. That would happen. Now, when you look at this polity, you would see that one form of questioning generally appears in prelims is on the basis of concepts. One. And the extrapolation of these concepts are generally extended to, in these days, to political theory. Right? In these days, they're extending this aspect of questioning to political theory. The second area of questioning in the context of polity as such is parliamentary functioning. And when you look at this parliamentary functioning, it is either the structure of the parliament or either the function of the parliament, right? These are the two major areas of questioning, especially in the context of prelims. Second, and when you look at the third aspect with respect to your polity, the third format of questioning majorly comes from local governance mechanisms, that especially on the basis of principle of subsidiarity. I think towards the end of today's session, we would discuss the various doctrines that we are going to see. So we would see that one questioning format generally appears from local governance systems. And the fourth area where you generally see questions in polity is bodies. That is your organizations, especially your constitutional bodies, non-constitutional bodies, and statutory bodies. You take the paper, there is no question paper which is of UPSC prelims without these bodies. For example, when you look at 2022 paper, there was a question on T-board. For example, when you look at 2020 question paper, there was question on Central Groundwater Authority, CGWA. Right. For example, if you look at 2019 question paper, there was question with respect to your Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board and Authority. Right. That was there. So every year, definitely there is one question on organizations. Right. So if you are able to manifest your preparation of prelims into these four clusters, you're going to handle those 18 to 20 questions which are generally appearing from prelims. Please understand that you have a very, very less leverage of making any mistake in these 18 to 20 questions, because these are definitely going to take you closer to the cutoff. And most of the crowd who is attempting this particular exam will generally not falter in these questions, right? So please remember that at any cost, you're supposed to go for a maximum accuracy in these questions, right? Now, keeping this, when you look at the conceptual aspect, generally we find one from the context of preamble, right? From the context of preamble. The second one is the cluster of fundamental rights, DPSP, and fundamental duties. And the third aspect that we would see in the is doctrines. For example, we have heard about doctrine of separation of powers, doctrine of basic structure, doctrine of pith and substance, doctrine of severability, doctrine of eclipse, doctrine of essentiality. All these are different doctrines which are present. What happens is, in the recent past, for example, when you look at the case of hijab, right? When you look at the case of hijab, there was this doctrine of essentiality which was used, and which was a genesis from your Shirur Mat case, which happened in 1950s, right? So we would look at those doctrines which are fundamentally used by your judiciary. Okay. So in concept aspect, in today's session, we are going to focus upon these. Now, when you look at the preamble aspect, first write down few things. Preamble. Identity of constitution. Right. Snippets. Identity of constitution. Identity of constitution. Derived from objective resolution. Mentions the source of authority. Non-justiciable in nature. Can be amended. When you're preparing snippets, please write it in this manner, right? Because every point is a statement. Please understand that, right? What is the last point I dictated? Can be amended without affecting the basic structure. Can be amended without affecting the basic structure. Inspired from US Constitution. Right? Now, when you look at preamble, it gives you the fundamental nature of India and Indian Constitution. And it is described as what? Triple S DR. Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Fundamental aspect. Now, here, when you look at sovereign aspect, now the fundamental thing that you need to remember with respect to sovereign is one is we can manage our own affairs, right? We can manage our own affairs. First aspect. The second aspect that it focuses upon is it focuses upon non-interference. Non-interference. Now, one extrapolated aspect of understanding of sovereignty is the aspect of state versus nation. For example, in 2021, there was one question: which of the following statements define state? Right? That was the question that was asked in 2021. So, one extrapolated concept of understanding of sovereignty is state versus nation. Now, when you look at the fundamental difference of state versus nation, when you look at state and nation, the major aspect is when you look at nation, it is more of a geographical as well as cultural entity. It is more of a geographical or cultural entity. But whereas when you look at state, it is more of a political entity which has a territory, which has a population, and which also has governing mechanism. These are the four major traits of a state which define or which make it actually a state, right? And whereas when you look at the nation, it is more of a geographical perspective as well as cultural perspective. And also write one particular line, write down. The idea of nation, the idea of nation is not coterminous. The idea of nation is not coterminous with the political boundary of the state. The idea of nation is not coterminous with the political boundary of the state. Now, what does that mean? That, for suppose if I say that this is a political boundary, right? I can have a nation here. For the reason I have defined it to be more of a cultural entity. But whereas when I look at state, I know that the state characteristic is political boundary and also a territory and also a population and also a governing mechanism. That is what is meant by that particular line. Please underline that coterminous, not coterminous, right? Now, one more extrapolated concept of understanding of sovereignty is here union or the aspects of territory. Union and the aspects of territory. Now, you definitely know that the fundamental understanding, everybody is an expert with polity. You see that territory is a much larger entity when compared to union. First aspect. The second aspect that you see in the context of India, whatever union it is forming, you see that it is not based on agreement. Right? Whatever definition that you have in your Article 1 is not based on agreement, just like your USA, which is based on agreement. In the context of India, it is not based on agreements. First thing. The second thing that you need to see is the nature is destructible. Now, when you look at this destructible nature, you fundamentally have to differentiate between your Article 2 and Article 3. Now, simplest way to remember Article 2 is to create. Article 3 is to modify. Article 2 is to create. Article 3 is to modify. Article 2 is if I want to create some new state, that I generally do by using Article 2. And if I have to modify something, be it the name, be it the territory, be it the area, whatever be those four conditions that are given as part of your Article 3, that is modification. And one particular condition that you need to remember here is when you have to modify something, there is one particular conditionality which says that it demands the prior consent of the president or the prior permission of the president. Just like your money bill that you have, you would also have to have a prior permission of the president in the context of Article 3. And also you have to see that you have to refer the matter to the corresponding state. You have to refer the matter to the corresponding state. Right? Now remember two words which generally UPSC plays with, right? In the context of polity, one word is mandatory, right? Jabardasti mein it uses. Jabardasti mein it uses saying, this particular condition is mandatory, right? It is mandatory that the bill has to be referred to the state. It is mandatory that the permission of the state has to be obtained, then only they can modify or then only they reorganize. Be very careful with the word mandatory in this context, right? And the second nature of the wording that is generally used in your polity original constitution, right? Be very, very careful with these two words in the statements. Whenever they're using the word mandatory, you please take a pause. Please take a pause. If it says that it has to be mandatorily referred to the president, yes. Mandatory, it is mandatory that you need to get the permission of the state? No. It is not mandatory for you to get the permission of the state. So please take a break when you see the word mandatory in polity questions. One. Second, take a break in polity questions when you come across the original constitution. For example, when you go back and refer your 2021 question paper, one particular question was there, what was the nature of India on or before 1950? It fundamentally is asking about the nature of India in the original constitution. And in the options, it has given here secular, socialist, democratic, sovereign, republic, all this order. Now here what you need to understand that in the original constitution, you had only SDR. Yes. Then what about your secular? Secular was added as part of your 42nd constitutional amendment. Please understand that is the fundamental meaning of original constitution. Original constitution is that where you don't have any amendments. Prior to the amendments, what is the nature? That is original constitution. If at all they say generally constitution, this includes both your original as well as amendment version. This includes original as well as the amendment version. Please remember this. Okay. Now, one more conditionality that you need to remember with respect to Article 2 and Article 3. You see that whatever be the activity that is going on with respect to Article 2 and Article 3, as per your Article 4, what does it say? It says that it does not account to Article 368. It does not account to Article 368. Remember this. It does not come under the aspect of amendability in the aspect of Article 368. Apart from this, one more small conditionality that you need to remember in the context of sovereignty is that when it comes to external actors or external territory, when it comes to external actors or external territory, we have to see that when we give away or exchange, right? Or when we secede or exchange. Now, in this aspect of exchange, one thing you need to remember that whenever we are going to lose some area, that definitely demands a constitutional amendment. That definitely demands a constitutional amendment, right? So whenever you come across this, whenever you see that there is a area or there is some land which is being lost from the Indian territory, we need constitutional amendment. But whereas if you're not losing anything, if they say that we are going to just exchange, right, one for one, then it is only an executive action. It is only an executive action. For example, you can come across here. Did you all hear about 100th constitutional amendment? Your 100th constitutional amendment is your land boundary agreement. Your land boundary agreement between your Bangladesh and India, there was something called as enclave structures. Yes, there was something called as enclave structures. And when you come across these enclave structures, that means something like this: India, Bangladesh, India, Bangladesh. So, in order to go for administrative convenience and in order to ensure the security, they had gone for exchange. Now, they had gone for exchange. Now, here, although the verbatim says that exchange, but what fundamentally happened is, did we lose land or did we not lose land? We lost the land. That was the fundamental reason why they had gone for amendment. Please remember this conditionalities. That is with respect to your sovereignty. Sovereignty is in a basic structure or not? Yes or no? Now, when you look at your basic structure, most of the terms of your preamble are part of basic structure. For example, when you look at this triple SDR, except one word, which is your socialist, is not part of basic structure, except socialist. For the reason, are we socialist now? We are a mixed economy. We are a mixed economy, and with that fundamental understanding, you can definitely say that your socialist principles are not part of your basic structure, because there can be a question which talks about basic structure and the elements of basic structure. So we have to remember, and don't keep on by hatting. What we do here, we are only focusing on exceptions. I will remember only exceptions, and whatever is there, that is the grace of UPSC. Right? We are only remembering exceptions, nothing beyond. Right? So the exception for basic structure doctrine is what? Is we don't have socialist principles as part of basic structure doctrine. Right? Next. The next dimension that we see is the aspects of socialism and aspects of socialist principles. Is it mentioned anywhere in the constitution apart from preamble? Sapandi, you write Lakshmikant on your own now, right? No, no, right? When I'm going to dictate the short notes on DPSP, you would realize that there is no inherent classification of DPSP as Gandhian, as socialist, as liberal. That is a convention. Please understand. Only preamble, it is mentioned first. And one dimension that we look in the context of socialist principles, we have something called as planning, right? Post independence era, we had this 5-year plans. And where did we borrow this idea from? Soviet Union. From Soviet Union, we had borrowed this idea of planning. And when you look at this planning, you know that there can be different kinds of planning, right? There can be different kinds of planning. One is indicative planning. The other one is perspective planning, right? One is with respect to your indicative planning. The other one is going to be with respect to your perspective planning. And the third one is imperative planning. Third one is imperative planning. Write one line about each of this, right? Because there were years where UPSC had directly asked which of the following are the features of indicative planning, or which of the following are the features of perspective planning. Now, in that context, although you would see these terms majorly in economy, but here let's finish it off, right? Write down one line. Indicative planning. Put an hyphen and write decentralized form. Decentralized form. Next, perspective planning. Put an hyphen and write complete control. Complete control in the central authority. Complete control in the central authority. Next, perspective. What did I say now? I told about perspective. Sorry, that was imperative. Recorrected. Sorry. First was indicative. The second one was imperative. The third one is perspective. Now write down about perspective. Long-term strategies. Long-term strategies. That is perspective planning. Right? Now, when we look at your 5-year plans, it was more of a imperative systems. And the fundamental understanding when you look at socialistic principles is you see that the major role is in the hand of state. And one small conflict that you would get to understand when you see socialism, one thing that emerges is versus communism. When you look at socialism, the complete control is in the hand of state. But whereas when you look at communism, you would see that the complete control is in the hands of community. Complete control is in the hands of community, right? Are you all with me? Is the pace fine? Slow it down. Or is it fine? It's fine. ఏదో ఒకటి చెప్పండి అయ్యా. Tell something. Snacks, chai, samosa. Should I ask them? Huh? Okay. నాకు మీరు క్లాస్లో ఉన్నట్టు నాకు తెలియాలి కదా. Yes or no? Right? So this is with respect to your socialism or socialist as part of your preamble. Now, what is our form of economy today? It is mixed. It's mixed. The third is secularism. The first thing that you need to remember with respect to secularism is it was added as part of your 42nd constitutional amendment first. And when you look at the fundamental concept of secularism, you see that we have Western thought and Indian thought. Just a conceptual brief about it. Your Western thought of secularism is what? You see that the religion and state are separated by a watertight compartments. That there is no interface, there is no interaction, there is no engagement, there is no any sort of connection that is going to exist between your religion and state. Right? State is a separate entity, religion is a separate entity. It is all watertight compartments. But when you look at the Indian philosophy of secularism, we see that the Indian form of secularism is more of an equidistant form. It is more of a equidistant form. Now, what do you fundamentally mean by equidistant form of secularism? It fundamentally means that state is going to consider every religion on a similar platform. And as and when required, it is going to interfere. As and when required, it is going to interfere with an objective of what? With an objective of welfare. Welfare. Right? And this objective of welfare is mentioned where, my dear? Your DPSP article 38, which gives the obligation of state on ensuring or creating a welfare state. Please understand, that is only going to be the basis of the state to interfere into the religion. Conceptual understanding, right? Now, apart from that, another thing that you need to understand in the context of secularism is theocracy. Is theocracy. Now, here what you fundamentally talk about theocracy, what does this mean? You would have heard about different forms of government, right? Autocracy, aristocracy, democracy, theocracy. What is theocracy? These days it is the era of technocracy. These days it is the era of technocracy. Fundamentally, the ruler is technology. That is what is meant by technocracy. In the similar manner, when you talk about theocracy, it is who? The fundamental element of administration is religion. The fundamental element of administration is religion. This is a theocratic form of government, which is fundamentally an opposite concept as that of your secularism. Are you understand? Right? Now that is with respect to your secularism as a principle. Now moving to democracy. The fundamental understanding of democracy is what? Participation. Right? It is about participation. It is about empowerment. It is about representation. It is about participation. It is about empowerment. It is about representation. And when I look at this democracy, I know that there can be two forms of democracy that fundamentally exist. One is procedural democracy. One is the procedural democracy. The second one is substantive democracy. One is procedural, the other one is substantive democracy, right? This understanding is important for this year and next year. This understanding is important for this year and next year, right? If they fundamentally wants to test the question on democracy, this understanding is going to be important for the reason that 2024 is going to be a election year. 2024 is going to be a election year, right? And for Indians, the democracy is fundamentally elections. No, if somebody asks you what is democracy, you will say, "Oh, sir, voting, voting, voting." That's what happens, right? And everybody will put that ink mark as status. I exercised. I am a citizen. Right? Apart from that, is there any broader understanding of democracy that we have? No, right? So when you look at fundamentally this understanding of democracy, what do you mean by procedural democracy? When you talk about procedural democracy, it is only focusing on process. Process of what? Process of elections. It is fundamentally focusing upon a process, and that process of elections. Are you understanding? Right? That is why it is called as procedural. That is why it is called as procedural. Right? Now, if you have to extrapolate this understanding of procedural democracy, it is more of a political democracy. It is more of a political democracy because for me, democracy in this perception fundamentally means elections. It is more of a political democratic understanding. But when I look at the second form of understanding, that is the substantive. One thing you need to remember with respect to substantive democracy is it is comprehensive. It is comprehensive understanding of democracy first. The second thing that you need to remember, apart from it being comprehensive form of democracy, you also need to remember that it has a socio-economic dimension. It has a socio-economic dimension. And what you need to more understand, it subsumes procedural democracy as well. It subsumes procedural democracy as well. Now, here, when you try to conceptually understand what you mean by substantive democracy, is that no doubt I am following the procedure which is making me a democracy, that is fundamentally elections. I'm doing it. But the fundamental aspect of following this procedural thing is imbibed with the social and economic aspect. For example, When you look at Indian democracy, it is always an opening comment which is said, or if you have to comment upon Indian democracy, it is fundamentally believed that it is more of a procedural democracy rather than a substantive democracy. And when you have to substantiate this particular statement of saying that Indian democracy is more of a procedural rather than a substantive, the fundamental understanding is you see that 21.9 percentage of Indian population is below poverty line. Don't you think so? And there is a 20% increase in the crime rate against your scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And there is violence against women that is existing. That fundamentally means that there are bunch of social issues, there are sections of vulnerability which are existing in the Indian society. And with that kind of existence, still we are following the procedure. That means for us, the focus is more of procedure, not the socio-economic welfare. When you try to emphasize in a democratic system, along with political, along with the procedural, you try to emphasize your socio and economic welfare, you call it as substantive democracy. That means not only elections, but I talk about poverty eradication. I talk about social empowerment. I talk about social inclusion. Now, through my democratic systems, if I'm able to ensure these aspects of poverty eradication, social inclusion, social empowerment, and social upliftments, any of that sort, along with the procedure, I call it as substantive democracy. Are you understanding? Yes or no? Please, my dear, don't be so మాటలు రావట్లేదు. Right? I can understand it's a cozy evening. I know. Right? దుప్పట్లు తెప్పించుకుంటారు, చెప్పు పడుకుంటారు. No. First session, prelims. How you should be? You should jump from your chairs. No. Right? Did you understand? You should say, yes, sir. On, my dear. Energy is the source of this exam. No energy, sir. I will bubble like this. Oh. Exactly. That should be the energy, my dear. Right? Are you understanding? One small extension. The understanding of social inclusion. One small extension of democratic systems. When you talk about social inclusion, the fundamental understanding that you need to remember with respect to social inclusion is if you are enabling any particular group of their access to resources, their access to opportunities, and their participation. If you ensure opportunities, if you ensure resources, if you ensure participation of a particular group, this would result in social inclusion. Are you understanding? Yes? Okay. One more chutpusa concept. Social capital. 2019 question. 2019 PYQ. Social capital. Now here, before we enter into social capital, when you see capital as an understanding, you believe that it is more of a long-term investment, right? And when you look at the different forms of capital, that anything that you need to consider, one is your physical capital, financial capital, human capital, social capital, and natural capital. These are the 5 different forms of capitals that I can have. One is physical, financial, human, social, and natural. Now, your physical and financial capital, you know, physical capital is to do more of your infrastructure. Your financial capital has got to do with your investments, right? When you talk about human capital, The fundamental understanding with respect to human capital is what? It is all about realizing human potential. That human potential can be realized through skill, through education, through health, through technology, any of these dimensions. If I'm able to realize these dimensions, if I'm able to create a conducive environment for this human to realize the potential through skill, through education, through technology, through health, I call it as human capital. Are you understanding? Right? Social capital. Now, one simple understanding about social capital. Write down a line about it. It is set of shared values, shared values, shared values, set of shared values that enable the individuals to work together, that enable the individuals to work together. This is social capital. That means simple understanding. For suppose say there are different entities like this. There are different entities like this in a society. And you know that any society is characterized with what, my dear? Any society is characterized with interaction. Any society is characterized with interaction. You know that it is a network of interactions. And when you look at this fundamental understanding of network of interactions, when I believe that all of these interactions are conducive, all of these interactions are positive, when I realize that all of these interactions are positive and conducive, don't you think the individuals are existing in harmony? The individuals are existing in with the principles of fraternity and brotherhood, right? All these terms we come across in preamble. We would see those also. Are you understanding, right? The manifestation of such a harmonic interaction or harmonious interaction is what is social capital. Are you understanding? Now, what is the meaning of natural capital? When you go back and refer 2020 question paper, there was one question which was asked which talks about social cost of carbon, right? Social cost of carbon in 2020, right? Now, just an extrapolated concept. Simple. When you talk about natural capital, what do you fundamentally mean by natural capital is I have this particular region. Now, here there is some flora, there is some fauna. And I know that there is a necessary interaction that is happening because the fundamental definition of ecosystem is what? It is an interaction that is exist. And when you realize that there is an interaction that is existing among your flora and fauna, there is a stable condition which is present. You call it as ecological equilibrium. Yes. And that ecological equilibrium, that interaction will have a value. And that value is what is called as natural capital. Right? For example, your red sanders. Your red sanders is what? It's a natural capital. Don't you think so? You're going and planting them? No. Pushpa is taking them away. That's a different issue. Right? That's a different issue. Now, Pushpa 2 also, how many red sanders? God knows. Right? That is what is meant by natural capital. For example, you have the medicinal value of particular tree. That is natural capital. You have the significance of particular animal. Natural capital. Are you understanding? Right? Then republic. When you look at the fundamental understanding of republic, one, all the offices are open to public. It is simply put it as popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty, fundamental understanding. The second thing that you see is the head of the state is elected. The head of the state is elected. Fundamental understanding. The opposite of this is your monarchical system. Your monarchical system, where you see that there is a hereditary transfer of the position of head of the state. And your Britain is known as constitutional monarchy. Constitutional monarchy. Are you understanding? This is republican, or this is what is the fundamental meaning of republic, right? So participation, every public office is open to everybody. Popular sovereignty, and the head of the state is elected, right? Now, after this, one very, very important term that we would have as part of your preamble is justice. Now, when you talk about justice, it talks about three types. One is social, economic, and political justice, right? And when you look at the dimensions of political justice, the fundamental manifestation of political justice in your Indian constitution is fundamental rights. And when you look at the manifestation of social and economic justice, to a larger extent, is your DPSP. Is your DPSP, right? Now write down. It is about being just. It is about being just, being fair, and reasonable. Derived from Russian constitution. Part of basic structure. Right? These three things that you need to know. One small extrapolated concept from this is forms of justice. When you look at the forms of justice, it is distributive justice, right? Restorative justice, right? Then retributive justice, and procedural justice. Simple understandings. I don't need to do thesis on this, right? PSI are optional. People don't get thinkers and all. Don't get excited, right? I know, right? I definitely know that you people would get excited, but restrict. I know, right? Asale PSI lo IR undi kada. Distributive. Now, when you talk about distributive justice, it is all about, right now, fair share of benefits and resources. Fair share of benefits and resources. Retributive justice believes in punishment. Retributive believes in punishment. Don't worry, I'll explain. Write these words. Punishment. Then restorative focuses on healing the wounds of victims. Not literal meaning of wounds, right? It is fundamentally about injustice, right? Write down. Focuses on healing the wounds of victims, victims, and procedural. Procedural focuses on implementation, focuses on implementation, right? Just listen, simple. When you talk about distributive justice, now what am I doing? Say that I have a fair share. Now I have some resources with me. Now, when I ensure that these resources are distributed equally, I ensure there is distributive justice. And you know that your DPSP categorically talks about distributive justice. Yes, your Article 39, Clause B, and 39, Clause C talks about prevention of concentration of wealth in the hands of few. That is the fundamental understanding. So, that is what is meant by distributive justice. When you talk about restorative justice and retributive justice, now here, when you look at your retributive versus restorative, what you see is that in retributive, I know that one is the perpetrator and the other one is victim. The other one is victim. This fellow is the culprit, the other one is victim or perpetrator and victim. If you look at retributive justice, I'm ensuring that there is an injustice that is done to this individual. In the process of injustice, what I'm doing is I would try to punish this fellow. For me, the justice is all about punishing the perpetrator, punishing the culprit, so that they do not escape the process of law. Fundamental understanding. But when I look at restorative justice, I know that there is this perpetrator, and I also know that there is this victim. Now, in this process of restorative justice, my focus is not on punishing this fellow, but my focus is on managing the injustice that has been done to the victim. That is what is meant by healing the wounds of the victim. Are you getting it? Are you getting it? This is restorative. And the last one is what? Procedural. Now, what do you mean by this procedural? I see that there is some implementational process. For example, you talk about Article 22. What is your Article 22, which talks about your preventive and punitive detentions? That is a procedure. There is a procedure that is laid down for your punitive detention. If I don't follow that procedure that is laid down for me to be followed during that punitive detention, am I giving procedural justice? No. That means this is more involved about what is the regular process. This is more about the implementational aspect. Are you understanding? Right? These are different forms of justice. Now, one small extrapolated concept from this is rule of law. Your A.V. Dicey's concept of rule of law. Right? Lick low, right? No arbitrary nature. No arbitrary nature. No arbitrary nature. Supremacy of law. Supremacy of law. No arbitrary nature. Supremacy of law. And all are equal before law. All are equal before law. Are you understanding? Have we completely brought in the concept of rule of law of A.V. Dicey? No. A.V. Dicey's concept talks about three fundamental bases. We have borrowed only two. Right? Rule of law is from which? Inspired from whom? British. British. Right? This is with respect to rule of law, which is an extrapolated concept of justice. Right? Then after that, equality. When you talk about equality, they say that equality of status and opportunities. Yes. Do we have this word called status and opportunities in some other part of the constitution? or only in fundamental rights, or sorry, only in preamble? I know, right? This is what happens. Sir, I think it is in Akade, gone. Thought is there only. Then what do? You don't want to leave the question because your ego will get hurt. No, 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 no. This is a question from very simple, which is very, very simple, and I have mastered Lakshmikant. And how can I leave this question? Ego. Then what do? Half the pen you eat. Ah. By the time that question gets over, all the black ink is here, like this. Gone. Now, when we are studying these sections, we would study one particular aspect called convergence. For example, in 2015, there was one question which talked about sovereignty, unity, and integrity is in which part of the constitution? Which part? Preamble. Arre. First option was preamble. And we are excited. And we mark. Mama, we nailed it. Finally, nail is on your head. Huh? That's what happens. Excitement. And polity is one section where you will see the most silly mistakes. Trust me. It is a section which spoils your selection into mains. Many silly mistakes because you get excited. I don't know what Lakshmikant has doped you with. Excitement. Convergence. The word SU, sovereignty, unity, and integrity, is in fundamental duties. Only unity and integrity is in preamble. We don't focus. We by had we the people of India. Everything you may. What happens? Exceptions. Convergence. We would see there are 5 to 6 such sections which we have to remember. That's all. Don't worry. When we enter the section of fundamental rights and DPSP, we would see those things. Okay. When I talk about equality, the Indian Constitution talks about equality of status and opportunity. Not only that, it also talks about equality before law and equal protection of law. Right? That is fundamentally talking about equals being treated equally. That is the fundamental understanding of equality. Right? Now write down. First write this point. Includes equality before law and equal protection of law. Second, equality of status and opportunity. Equality of status and opportunity. Third, absence of privileges. Absence of privileges. Absence of privileges. Are you understanding? Right? So any understanding of equality is these 3 components. Okay. Next is what? Liberty. Liberty 2017 PYQ. 2017 they had asked about what do you understand by liberty. You go and refer, my dear. The 1 year they asked about liberty. 1 year they asked about equality. 1 year they asked about state. 1 year they asked about social capital. Now they are fundamentally focusing upon philosophy of Indian Constitution. That is why we call it as political theory to a larger extent, the thinker's perspective. For example, in 2021 question paper, you see that they had asked about separation of powers, the fundamental understanding of separation of powers, right? So we are focusing on all of this. So when we'll talk about liberty, right? Absence of restraints, absence of restraint. Restraints means restrictions, right? Banisa Sankildu, levu. That is liberty, right? Restraints. Second, activity with responsibility. Activity with responsibility. Activity with responsibility. Now, here, what is it fundamentally saying is liberty is all about I can do what I want. But one fundamental understanding about I can do what I want is there is also confusion that exists with freedom. Freedom. Now, when you look at the hairline difference between freedom and liberty, freedom is I do not have any boundaries. I do not have any boundaries. I can do what I want. I can act at my will. But when it comes to liberty, you need to fundamentally understand that yes, I can act according to my will, but I have certain boundaries first. And where is this boundary starting? The boundary is starting at the liberty of others. It is starting at the boundary of or the liberty of others. That means I can do what I want, I can exercise at my own will, but I cannot intrude or interfere into the liberty of others. That is what is the fundamental understanding of liberty and the difference with freedom. This is to act with responsibility. The fundamental understanding of liberty is to act with responsibility. Now, there are two different forms of liberty that are generally perceived. And you see that one is positive concept of liberty and the other one is negative concept of liberty. Positive concept of liberty and the other one is negative concept of liberty. And when you get to understand the positive concept of liberty, it fundamentally means that there are no restraints. There are no restraints, but there are conducive conditions which are created as well. There are conducive conditions which are created. That means that liberty is not merely absence of restraints, but it is an opportunity that is provided for the individual to realize the potential of oneself. That means I don't have restraints, but I also create a conducive condition so that the individual's potential is realized. That is what is meant by positive aspect of liberty or positive liberty. When I talk about negative liberty simply means absence of restraints. I am not doing anything, but I am neither restricting. When I don't restrict, it is negative. India follows which form? Both. Already a civil servant, diplomatic answer, both, sir. We majorly go for positive. Positive, right? Because although your fundamental rights talks about freedom, but they talk about reasonable restrictions. That means action with responsibility. Action with responsibility. That is liberty. But your simultaneously your DPSP will come into the picture talking about welfare, talking about directions for good governance. Right? So we majorly focus on positive form of liberty. Are you understanding? Right? My dear, if you don't understand, please stop me at any point and ask. Right? Okay, we have all the time in this world. 100 hours is more than sufficient to revise whole GS. నేను నమ్ముతున్నాను మీరు నమ్ముతున్నారు. Yes. If you don't believe also, I will make you believe. है तो है. हाँ, exactly. We have to, my dear, more than sufficient. हो जाएगा. पूरा GS will finish in 100 hours. We'll keep some buffer of 2 hours for enjoyment. Right? 2 hours like chill. Okay. Is this clear? Liberty. Now, fraternity. Now, fraternity simply understood as what? It is brotherhood. Do we have this word in Constitution? Brotherhood. है? No, no. हाँ यार, brotherhood. It's there. No, no. Fraternity. Preamble. अच्छा. Pavlu. Fundamental duties. లేదంటే కాన్ఫిడెన్స్. Brotherhood we get from fundamental duties. There is a direct mention. All of your ethical principles are mentioned in fundamental duties. Write down. Generalization. We would see for every subject one aspect called general principles. And this exam is driven with generalizations. Because I can't remember everything. Now I will generalize and remember that the ethical principles are fundamentally mentioned in fundamental duties. I talk about rationalism. Rationalism is there. Empiricism, it is there. Compassion, it is there. Brotherhood, it is there. Yes or no? If I don't recollect, I use my general principles. I use my general principles. So the first technique of memorization is generalizations. Write down general principle. The ethical principles, the ethical principles, hyphen terms, ethical principles slash terms are mentioned in fundamental duties. Are mentioned in fundamental duties. All these general principles, please keep them in box. Right? That is my principle. I want you to keep them in box. So that what happens is just before going to examination, what we will do? You will do all drama, no? Right? What do you do? On the morning of the examination, your parents will come to take you to exam. Veeratilakam. Knife. And they'll take you just to give build up. Right? You would not have studied for 2 months. But when you see your parents morning, and some people are very good experts at that, they would be looking at a blank notebook like this. And parents, Nana, tension teeskoku. Bhai saab, kahan se tension? This fellow gives tension, not takes. Huh? Don't you think so? Just imagine an individual is seeing all this. You are silently standing. Your parents will say, hello, kuch to revise karo. Especially mothers. They will come. Nana, you revised? నన్ను ఏదో బుక్కులు తిప్పేస్తున్నావు, నువ్వు ఏదో ఒకటి తిప్పు. తిప్పకండి, మొత్తం తిప్పేస్తుంది లోపల. This exam is all about balance. First principle of this exam is balance. Balance of what? Buddhi, mind, thought, emotions. Right? Don't Remember your relatives before exam. I have to take revenge on my relatives. X. Not all this. Balance. Very much important, right? So this is with respect to fraternity. Now, write down some convergence that we will see. Before writing convergence, write down certain principles of fundamental rights. Write down. Write down some principles of fundamental rights. First, they are negative. They are negative. Negative. They are justiciable. They are negative. They are justiciable. They are not absolute. They are not absolute. They are not absolute. Contains reasonable restrictions. Contains reasonable restrictions. Applicable. Next one. Applicable to both. Applicable to both citizens and non-citizens with certain exceptions. Applicable to both citizens and non-citizens with certain exceptions. In bracket 15, 16, 19, 29, 30. Article 15, 16, 19, 29, 30. Next, they are amendable. They are amendable. In bracket special majority. In bracket special majority in parliament. In parliament. Right? Some general principles of DPSP. Right now. DPSP. From instrument of instructions. Derived from instrument of instructions. Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935. Taken from Irish Constitution. Taken from Irish Constitution. Considered as novel feature. Considered as novel feature. DPSP. DPSP along with fundamental rights. DPSP along with fundamental rights are considered as conscious of constitution. They are considered as conscious of constitution or conscience of constitution. DPSP along with fundamental rights are considered as conscience of constitution. Next. Non-justiciable. 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 But enable. But enable in determining the constitutional validity of a law. But enable in determining The constitutional validity of a law. Confers no legal rights. Confer no legal right. Confers no legal right. And no legal remedies. And no legal remedies. Constitution. Constitution does not classify. Constitution does not classify. Constitution does not classify DPSP. Right? Just like you have classification of, you say that Gandhian, socialist and liberal principles, there's no constitutional classification. Are you understanding? Right? General principles, fundamental duties. Fundamental duties. Not the original part of constitution. Not the original part of the constitution. Incorporated by 42nd constitutional amendment. Incorporated by 42nd constitutional amendment. Under Swaran Singh committee recommendations. Under Swaran Singh committee recommendations. Non-justiciable in nature. Non-justiciable in nature. And no legal enforcements. Non-justiciable in nature and no legal enforcements. Only for citizens. Only for citizens. Only for citizens. Right? This is some general principles of fundamental duties. Right? Now, when you go back and refer to your questions, you see that UPSC is fundamentally playing on each of these statements, right? Now, we'll look at each of these fundamental rights first, then we would get into the other dimensions. Before I enter into fundamental rights, one thing you need to remember is some aspects of citizenship. Now, please do not by heart your articles under citizenship, right? Do not by heart from article 5 to 10, not needed. Just remember article 11. Article 11 states what? That the power to make the provisions of the citizenship is in the hands of Parliament. First. Second point. Second point. No provisions. No provisions of acquisition. No provisions of acquisition and termination of citizenship. No provisions of acquisition and termination of citizenship has been mentioned in Constitution. No provisions of acquisition and termination mentioned in Constitution. That means your Constitution does not talk about the ways of acquiring citizenship, ways of terminating it, right? You see that there are 5 ways of acquisition, right? What is that? NRI BD. NRI BD. ఎక్కడికో వెళ్ళకండి, ఇక్కడే ఉండండి. What is N? R, I, incorporation, B, birth, D. Simple. 5 ways. Not mentioned in Constitution, but given as per your Citizenship Act 1955. There are three ways of termination: RDT, Rural Development Trust, RDT, mnemonic, mnemonic, right? Just to keep it in your head. R is renunciation, D is deprivation, T is termination. One small clarification that you need to have here: the difference between renunciation, deprivation, and termination. Right, right. Renunciation, it is voluntary. I give up. That is renunciation. When you talk about deprivation, it is what? You acquire the citizenship of other country, because we believe in the principle of what? Single citizenship, right? So this is that when you acquire the citizenship of some other country, you see that the Indian citizenship automatically terminates itself. That is deprivation. Termination, simple thing to remember, that any activity that is done against constitution, the individual citizenship is going to be terminated. And generally your polity gives you 4 different conditionalities. Now, as a generalization, remember in this manner that anything against constitution, you see that the citizenship being terminated. Are you understanding? Right? Now, when you enter into fundamental rights, now we are not going to by hat. What are we going to do? We are going to look at exceptions and something called as catches. UPSC will catch your leg there. That's what happens. Catches. Now here, from 14 to 18, Article 14 to 18 is with respect to your equality. 14 to 18 is with respect to your equality. Now here you need to remember with respect to Article 19, right? One is your, it starts with freedom of expression, then assembly, then association. How do you remember assembly and association? E comes before O. E comes before O. So assembly, association, then MRP. MRP. M is movement, residence, profession. Is profession. Right? Now, one small exception that you need to remember with respect to, movement. When you look at movement, there are 2 forms of movement that can I have. One is internal, the other one is external. Internal movement is regulated by Article 19. External movement is regulated by Article 21. Remember this, right? This is the general catch which is done made by UPSC. It catches you there. That the movement of an individual is seen with respect to internal, it is 19, external, it is 21. One aspect. Then apart from that, you also see that there are certain reasonable restrictions which are put in as part of Article 19, right? In that, please remember there is a word called defamation. We generally exclude this word, right? There is a word called defamation which is mentioned as part of your reasonable restrictions. Defamation is there. And you also see another word called contempt of court. Contempt of court. Contempt of court, is it mentioned in some other part of the constitution? No. TN extract. Huh? Is it mentioned? Yes, no. Is it mentioned? Yes or no? 2019 there was a question. 2021 there was a question. It is not mentioned, my dear. It is not mentioned. But the provisions for your contempt of court is derived from Article 129 and Article 215. Your Mungolkar principles. When we're going to discuss judiciary, I would tell you about the process of contempt of court. Right? Please remember. Please remember. Okay. Then this is one small exception that we are supposed to remember. Then one more small exception with respect to Article 18, 2021 question. When you look at Article 18, it says about what? Titles. Right? There is an exception. The exception is you can go for your academic and military titles. Right? And when you look at this condition of Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan, those are also exempted. Those are also exempted. Right? And one more thing that you need to remember with respect to another article here is Article 17. Now, Article 17 talks about untouchability, but it does not define. It does not define. And the legislative power with respect to Article 17 is only in the hands of Parliament as per Article 35. Right? As per Article 35, which talks about certain special powers given only to Parliament. You see that one such thing is Article 17. One aspect. Then apart from this, you see Article 21. And when you look at this Article 21, as per your constitution, we have this procedure established. But as per your Maneka Gandhi case, it is due process. So does your Indian constitution talk about due process? Does your Indian constitution talk about due process? No. Procedure established. Right? One. Then apart from that, Article 20, which talks about evidence, which talks about self-incrimination, all this process. Whatever conditions of double jeopardy, all these are mentioned, that is applicable only for criminal cases. That is applicable only for criminal cases, nothing to do with your civil aspects at all. Right? And there are certain exceptions which are provided. For example, if you have to talk about the body samples, you cannot deny. Right? If you have to talk about body samples, you cannot deny. If you have to talk about the signatures, those cannot be denied, because in the recent past you see number of drug cases being busted, and in that context people say no, my fundamental rights are being breached, they are collecting my blood sample, and you should immediately say, Are Babu, we can collect, because there is an exception under your Article 20. Are you getting it? Right? Then Article 22. Now when you look at Article 22, it talks about two forms of detention. One is punitive detention. The other one is preventive detention. Now, one thing that you need to remember with respect to punitive detention is what? That the reason has to be stated within 24 hours. The individual has to be brought before district magistrate. Then apart from that, they are subjected to legal assistance. They are subjected to legal assistance. But whereas in the context of preventive detention, the reason need not be stated. The reason need not be stated if the public interest is going to be breached. The reason need not be stated if the public interest is going to be breached. The second thing, I do not have this condition of 24 hours. I can maximum detain this individual for 3 months. Right? And if the extension of this detention has to be done, then I have to have a high court panel. I have to have a high court panel if the extension has to be done in the context of preventive detention. Are you understanding? Now, please understand that whatever legislations are made for this, the legislations regarding this detention can be made by both parliament as well as state legislature, right? As well as state legislature. Okay. So whatever conditions are made with respect to your preventive detention, it can be made by both your parliament as well as state legislature. It is not only the imperative of parliament. Remember. Then 23, 24, it's okay, but one small exception that you need to remember under 24. 24 is what? Child labor. What you people are doing now, that only. Huh? Yes or no? Preparing for UPSC, you consider it to be child labor. Search in. అర్థమైందా అన్నప్పుడు ఎస్ సార్ లేదు ఎస్ సార్ చైల్డ్ లేబర్ హూ ఇస్ ఎ చైల్డ్ మై డియర్ హియర్ ఏమనంటే సార్ వీఆర్ చైల్డ్ బై హార్ట్ Article 24. It talks about child labor. And when you talk about this child labor, one particular exception it talks about is that 14 years wala condition. 14 years. You see that you divide them into hazardous and non-hazardous. There is no condition which talks about non-hazardous employment. But it categorically states that you cannot employ these individuals in hazardous environment. Please understand this. But whereas your Child Labor Prohibition Act, it talks about this categorical differentiation in a detailed manner, but your constitution does not speak, right? Then I think we missed one article, Article 21A. Your Article 21A is what? 6 to 14, right? One particular important constitutional amendment is your 86th constitutional amendment, which has amended your fundamental rights, right? Then apart from that, you also see that your DPSP is also amended. Which article? ఒక్కొక్క ఆర్టికల్ చెప్పండి 100 అయిపోతాయి. Very good. 45. Your Article 45, they had made it from 0 to 6. Then fundamental duties. Fundamental duty, the 11th fundamental duty was added. The age bracket is 6 to 14. And the condition with respect to education. So your education has a link with 86th constitutional amendment. Not only that, it also has a link with 42nd constitutional amendment, where it transferred the subject of education into concurrent list. Are you understanding? What are we doing so far? We are mapping. We are mapping. We are having a ball of concepts. What are we doing? We're just taking out thread by thread. Now here for you, memorization will not be, memorization will be an effortless activity. Don't you think so? Now when you remember education, I know 42nd and 86. Yes, 42nd and 86. 86 has impacted your FR, DPSP, FD, all three. Are you understanding? Right? Now, Article 25. Now, when you talk about Article 25, it is your religion, practice, preach, profess, all of this. It says one particular exemption it talks. It says that there is an exception with respect to public health morality, and public order, and any other fundamental right. Under these reasonable restrictions, your Article 25 does not function. A simple example, you talk about Santara, which is a practice of Jains. That was talking about breach of health. Health. You talk about Shabarimala issue. Now, when you look at Shabarimala case, what happened? Any other fundamental right? Because under Shabarimala case, what was the conditionality? They were saying Article 17, Article 19, Article 14, and also Article 21. Any other fundamental right, if it continues to be breached under Article 25, or Article 25 will stand to subsume. That is the fundamental understanding, and these are the reasonable restrictions or conditionalities which are imposed on Article 25. Simple, right? Then one small distinction that you need to remember in Article 29 and Article 30. Both are with respect to your minority rights or cultural rights to a larger extent. One small differentiation with respect to Article 29 is it is for both for majoritarian as well as minority population. First, the second thing that you need to remember with respect to Article 30, it is only for minorities. It is only for minorities. Second, then you see that language, script, and culture, LSC. Language, script, and culture, it is mentioned under Article 29. Then regarding the educational institutional provisions of minorities are mentioned under Article 30. Are you getting it? Right? And you see that your religious and linguistic minorities are mentioned but not defined. They are not defined. They do not lay down the criteria for your religious as well as linguistic minorities. There is no criteria laid down by Constitution. Please understand. Please understand. Right? Write down one general principle. General principle 2. In most of the cases, or in most of the conditions, whatever you want to put it, in most of the cases or in most of the conditions, Constitution do not define the terms. Constitution do not define the terms, but it just mentions. But it just mentions. UPSC is very good at playing these terms. It says it has defined, it is mentioned. If it is mentioned, you can give a benefit of doubt. Definitely not definition. Because remember that if I want to define each term that is mentioned in the Constitution, I have to write one more Constitution. For now, 300 articles only, people are like, sir, no, we don't want to. Just imagine if every term is defined. Is it logical? Not logical. So whenever you come across that this particular term has been defined in Constitution, we give a benefit of doubt, marking that statement as wrong. Because our principle of prelims is what? We are not searching for answer. We are eliminating which is not an answer. That's all. Once you keep on eliminating every aspect, you arrive at the answer. Yes, that is what is the funda that we follow when we are going to solve our questions. Please understand, right? Then Article 32. When you look at Article 32, you know that this is with respect to your remedies, right? Remedies, which is considered as the soul of the Indian Constitution. Soul of the Indian Constitution, and you see that you have 5 different ways. Here, 5 different writs. One is with respect to habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto. Quo warranto. This is for both public and private. This is for both public and private. Private. That means you have to present the body within the body. That is what is meant by habeas corpus. Mandamus is only for public offices. Public offices. And please remember one condition, that if the function which has been brought in under writ of mandamus, if it is not a mandatory function of that public office, then your mandamus does not apply. That means, put it, public office only for mandatory functions. Write it this way. Only for mandatory functions. Only for mandatory functions. Next, prohibition. Prohibition, it is only for judicial and quasi-judicial. Judicial and quasi-judicial. And this prohibition is preventive in nature. It is preventive. Right? So P, prohibition, preventive, PP. C, this is seditiary. This is for judicial, quasi-judicial, and also administrative bodies. Judicial, quasi-judicial, and also administrative bodies. Seditiary is both preventive and curative. Is both preventive and curative, right? Then last one is quo warranto, right? That is regarding your holding of the position, holding of the office. Quo warranto. Now under this quo warranto, one exception is it is not applicable for legislative and private offices. It is not applicable for legislative and private offices. Are you getting it? Right? Write down one line. This is the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court. This is the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Original jurisdiction of Supreme Court. But not exclusive. But not exclusive. It is the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court, but not exclusive, right? Your 33 is regarding your uniform services. That means demanding their action, demanding their function without any restrictions, right? Uniform services. Please remember the exception is even the non-combatants, even the non-combatants are considered under Article 33. That means your parliament can create a provision or can force these uniform services to function at all time. There are no restrictions, right? And in that context of uniform services, they even include non-combatants. Non-combatants means you would have heard about drivers in military, cooks in military, those who serve in their departmental stores. All these are who? Non-combatants. For them also Article 33 applies. One exception. Then Article 34 with respect to martial law. Martial law. This impacts fundamental rights. This impacts governmental system. This impacts judiciary. This impacts fundamental rights. This impacts governmental mechanism. And this will impact judiciary. right? You would compare it with emergency normally. In emergency, there's no impact on judiciary, right? But in emergency, you have an impact on federal system. We would discuss that those aspects tomorrow, right? Article 35. Article 35 categorically states what? The exclusive functions of Parliament. The exclusive functions of Parliament. Under that, Article 16, Article 17, Article 16, Article 17, Article 23, Article 32, and Article 33. Right? 16, 17, 23, 32, 33. 22 ulta is 32. Right? 6 plus 7 is 13. So 3 has to be there. Exam, sir, how can you? If you don't remember like this, you are stuck at Article 16. Article 16. Sir told 4 more articles. Bandi kadaldaya. We have to remember all these fuddu logics. No other go. Because exam pressure. Exam pressure. Right? Now write down convergence. Convergence. The word culture. The word culture. In which all provisions do we have culture? Then bolo, bolo. Stuck. Right? UPSC will give A, preamble, B, fundamental rights, comma, fundamental duties, C, fundamental rights, DPSP, fundamental duties, D, not mentioned in constitution. Huh? None of the above. There's no option, my dear. Or in all three we have culture, right? In all three we have culture. The differentiating aspect between DPSP and fundamental duties. In fundamental duties, culture does not come simply, but it comes with the word composite culture. If it is coming with composite word, it is fundamental duties. If it is coming along with language, script, and culture, it is fundamental rights, Article 29. If it is coming chumma culture, there is no word called chumma in constitution. Simple culture. It is DPSP. Remember. Remember. Right? Next. The second convergence that we find environment. Where all it is? Fundamental duties, DPSP, fundamental rights. No. Yes. Huh? It is there. 21, it is there. It is there in original constitution. Or it is after MC Mehta case. After MC Mehta case. Yes. So it is part of DPSP. And how do you differentiate? If it comes with the word natural, then it is naturally fundamental duties. If it comes with the word natural, it is fundamental duties. Are you understanding? Right? In DPSP, you would have general environment. Are you understanding? Convergence. Because the reason we are discussing about this convergence is UPSC just gives off one line and you find this provision in which of the above. Just like I asked you about sovereignty, unity, and integrity. First option will be preamble. You mark preamble and come out and you scratch your head and say silly mistake. Sir, border lo points, sir. Every silly mistake counts. Please understand. Right? Next convergence is unity and integrity. Unity and integrity. I find these words in preamble as well as fundamental duties. I find these words in preamble as well as fundamental duties. One. In preamble, I find it only as unity and integrity. I find it only as unity and integrity. Yes, were they part of original constitution? Were they part of original constitution? Or were they added? Added? Very good. Remember this. But whereas when you talk about fundamental duties, if it comes along with sovereignty, unity, and integrity together, that is SU. Right? SU. SUI. Sovereignty, unity, and integrity. If it is coming along, then it is fundamental duties. Remember, right? Next. Dignity. Dignity. कहाँ कहाँ? Rights, directive principles, preamble. बोले यार सब कुछ చెప్పండి కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఎమర్జెన్సీలో కూడా డిగ్నిటీ వస్తుంది సార్ దరిద్రం కాకపోతే వాట్ మై డియర్ ఓన్లీ ఇన్ ప్రియాంబుల్ in fundamental duties it is dignity of women derogatory practices against women has to be curtailed and you see here dignity in the context of preamble. Are you getting it? Right? Next, status and opportunity. Status and opportunity, you find it in preamble and DPSP. DPSP article 38. Article 38. Are you understanding? Convergence, right? Fraternity. Fraternity, where all do you find? Only in preamble. But the principles of fraternity, fundamental duties also, fundamental rights also, you find principles. There's a difference from that word and the principles behind that word. Both are different, my dear. Do not confuse. Do not confuse. Principles behind equality, you find it in DPSP also, duty also, FR also, preamble also. But the word equality, You find it in preamble. You find it in fundamental rights. So please understand this conditionalities. The principles and the words both are going to vary, right? Then let's look at some exceptions of DPSP to an extent. Some exceptions of DPSP, straight away write down. When one thing that we have to understand about DPSP is all of them are not original provisions, right? We have three different amendments that are related to this. One is 42nd, 44, and 86. 42 plus 44 is CSAT. You are CSAT. I'm teaching you CSAT. Lick lo. 42nd, 44, 86. We have a similar calculation when we talk about your 8th schedule. 21st, 71st. How much? 92nd or 91st? Pakka. CSAT, simple addition. Now you understood why your CSAT is weak. Sir, 91, 92, 93. 92nd. These three amendments are related to 8th schedule. Bodo, Dogri, Maithili, Santali were added in 92nd. Your Konkani, Manipuri and Nepali were added in 71st. Do you understand? Right? What is 91st constitutional amendment? Very good. Anti-defection. 52nd and 91st is anti-defection. Right? Right on. 42nd amendment. 39A. 39A. What is 39A? Free legal aid. 39A. 43A. 48A. 39A. 43A. 48A. Then one more. 39F. 39F. Then 44th. Article 38. Article 38. 86th is Article 45. 97th is with respect to your cooperative societies. 43B. 43B. Right? This question was asked in 2017. This part. Direct. So that is the reason why we have to remember. Right? Now, one simple thing that you need to remember is between the provisions of 41 to 43A in DPSP, it is all related to work. It is all related to work. And 42 talks about maternity. 42 talks about maternity. 43 talks about living wages. It talks about living wages, right? It talks about living wages. Okay. A brief mention of Gandhian and all this right now. Gandhian. Under Gandhian principles, it is Article 40. Article 40. 40 is what? Village panchayats. 43B. 43B. 46. Make a similar table, my dear, right? Gandhian, liberal, socialist. Under Gandhian, write these articles 40, 43b, 46, 47. 47, you see that 47 is broken into two. 47 under Gandhian talks about intoxication. Under Gandhian, 47 talks about intoxication. And 48 is also broken into two. Under Gandhian, it talks about cow slaughtering, slaughtering of cows. Liberal, under liberal, 44, 45, 48. Under liberal, 48 talks about animal husbandry. Under Gandhian, 48 talks about prevention of slaughtering of cows. Under liberal, it talks about animal husbandry, right? Next, 48A, 48A, 49, 49, 50. 50 talks about what? Separation of power between judiciary and executive. 50 and 51. 51 regarding what? International relations. 51 regarding international relations. Next, under socialist. Under socialist, 38. 38, which talks about what? DPSP has directions for governance. It talks about equality of status and opportunity, right? 38, 39, 39A, 41. 41 is what? Right to work. 41 is right to work. 41, 42, 43, 43A. 43A is about what? Worker welfare and worker participation in management. 43A. 47. So 47 under socialist, we talk about standard of living and nutrition. 47 under socialist will talk about standard of living and nutrition. Whereas 47 under Gandhian was talking about intoxication, right? One small reference that you need to remember with respect to 39. You see that article 39 B and C versus article 14 and 19. You see that there's going to be primacy of these two articles as per your article 31C. As per article 31C. Because in your Champak Durai Rajan case, there was a conflict. Then in Golaknath case, they said that your fundamental rights are sacrosanct. Right? On a later date, in your Minerva Mills case, they finalized upon your balance of fundamental rights and DPSP are the bedrock of Indian constitution or bedrock of your democratic systems. Are they part of basic structure? Are your fundamental rights and DPSP part of basic structure? Huh? All the fundamental rights are part of basic structure. Yes or no? No. Fundamental rights and DPSP are part of basic structure. Yes or no? Huh? Yes or no? No. What is part of basic structure? The balance. Balance of fundamental rights and DPSP are part of basic structure. Please remember. Is welfare state part of basic structure? Yes, no. Yes. Welfare state is part of basic structure. Elections, basic structure or not? Yes. Parliamentary government, yes or no? Yes. right? So this is with respect to your fundamental rights, DPSP, and duties and philosophy of constitution. Now we have to move into doctrines, right? I think I would start tomorrow's session with doctrines. I think I would take roughly around 20-25 minutes to finish about doctrines. Then we would enter into the second section of polity, that is your parliament, right? Any doubts? Hmm? Now, what you're supposed to do after these sessions? మంచి క్లారిటీ ఉందా మీకు? One thing that you're supposed to do is revise. Second thing is solve the questions of previous year. You have to solve PYQs, right? And you would feel so confident, trust me. Immediately after, now you go back, have your dinner, open PYQs of these sections. You'll be like, Arre, Abba. You will feel them very easy. And next day morning, you'll be very confident. It's a virtuous cycle which is going to be created. Because unless and until you read these sections like this, is it difficult to remember? Easy? Simple? Yes? This is what is meant by exam oriented content. You will find that none of the PYQ is out of it. Dekh lena, go and check. None of the previous year questions are going out of these. None of the questions which are going to come also will go out of this. Sir, how can you say? Because that is what has been following by UPSC. We don't understand. We keep Lakshmikant, we'll keep the target 2 hours, first 11 chapters. That day, one chapter would have. And depression. Array, I thought 11 chapters, but only one chapter I covered. Next half day, I will sleep. I will do night out. A night rado out to hour. Gone. Immediately go back and solve these questions and revise these sections. Right? One more suggestion. Those who want to do some test papers, please start off parallelly along with these sessions, so that if you're able to do some tests of maybe one institute, any XYZ, I don't mention, do these sectional aspects, right? Sectional, so that in 5 days you finish polity. In 4 days you will finish geography. In 4 days you will finish environment. जादू तो create किया, हो गया भाई. And after that we'll finish PYQs. Then for 2 days you will relax, enjoy, party, no bandago, right? Your enjoyment will come only on May 29th, if everybody is clearing. May 29th, right? Okay, so please revise, and those who want to start off your practice questions and all, start off, right? Any doubts? Online students, any doubts? What should be the? Okay. Two minutes, right? I can understand. 2 minutes. Now, one thing you need to remember, that, sir, what is the priority of subjects? One thing is that you never know what UPSC is inclining towards. First. Second, I need not be strong in every subject. I have to be average in every subject. Second. Third, the definite return on investment will come with your these three. Return on investment. 1 రూపీ పెడితే 10 రూపాయలు బయటికి రావాలి మనం కదా ఇండియన్ మెంటాలిటీ మరి ఫ్రీగా వచ్చిన 10 రూపాయలు బయటికి తీయాలి ఎటో తిరిగి అంతే కదా నో ఇన్ past 1 week I have been experiencing in the context of fees I know what happens. Just kidding, my dear. Don't take it too serious. Okay. You see that polity, economy, and environment have a decent chunk of questions. Decent chunk of questions, roughly up to 60. And definite return on investments are these two. Because we have a definite trend of questions. Economy is also very definite trend. Polity also definite trend. It's all decoded. And इसमें से when you're going to get roughly 35 to 40 questions in these, your hitting rate will definitely be more than 32 because we would discuss those dimensions. That is what is needed. Now, when I already have 32 plus correct in these two, that means my score is how much, my dear? 64. How much I need? 36. How many questions are remaining? More than 50 questions are remaining still. Can't I get 36 out of 100? Prelims is easy. We should believe. And we will prove. Don't worry. Right? Any other? Right? We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.